All right, question number 91. What are the major reasons why old Earth creationists reject the idea of a young Earth? Okay, so again, most of the old Earth creationists do not believe that their interpretation has any effect on their faith. They believe that the Bible or the Book of Genesis is more it's true, but it's more of a poetic account of creation rather than a literal one. So, for example, every day except for the seventh ended with an evening and a morning, suggesting that our current era is a continuation of the seventh day, and then the prior days, according to them, could represent any length of time. When of course, with the fall of man, God said that Adam would die on that day. Well, physically speaking, Adam did not die. Again, this interpretation suggests that in that day stands for an era in time. It does not consider the doctrine of body, soul, and spirit, where the spirit of man died the moment sin occurred. So yeah, it's based on their interpretation of death. Okay, so what part of you actually died? Because you're actually three parts to one. And of course, if God said in that day that you will die, then He meant you will die. And so there is a part of Adam that died, and it's of course sin came alive in him. But that's a difference in doctrinal speaking. According to the old Earth creationists, as we continue, the flood, though seemingly large in scale, to the writer may have only been localized to a region. So they're denouncing the idea that of a global flood. The writer, because if there is a global flood, then you have a reasonable explanation for all the stratas, all the geological layers. You have a reasonable explanation for the death of dinosaurs. It basically underwrites anything that an aged Earth could state. Okay, so global flood is basically going to be against them. The writer, of course, they're suggesting that the writer of Genesis may not have known that the world was round. In fact, he may have thought that it was flat, or that the world was limited to everything he could see. So these are all differing interpretations of scriptures that accommodate for the belief of an old earth in conjunction with the biblical writings. They're basically again trying to incorporate mainstream science and by altering their interpretation to meet that standard. They're also under the assumption that meaning to change, they're changing their interpretation of scripture is basically what's taking place in order to accommodate that science. Other objections include the idea of, they don't like the idea of perfection cannot, or that it can actually exclude the process of death. Okay, so they don't like that. Okay, so when we talk about in young Earth creationism, that when God says that the Earth was, or that His creation was perfect, that we would be suggesting that it can't have death in it. Okay, so you can't have animals killing animals or people killing animals, and we're all vegetarians, so they don't like that. Okay, something must die and be consumed for life to continue, and according to their belief, well, that's only because of the world that they see now. Okay, they have no conception of the world before the flood, so they're just guessing again to accommodate another idea. To accommodate evolutionists, they often point to plants. Okay, and even though plants can't feel emotions and they don't have blood, which is the defining feature of life according to Scripture in Leviticus chapter 17 verse 11, they're saying that plants die, so that that can't be accurate. Well, again, they're not paying attention to Scripture. The idea that man existed at the same time as the dinosaurs is also a very difficult thing for them to believe. Considering their size, old Earth creationists will also object to the idea that all animals were vegetarians before the fall. For example, Tyrannosaurus rex looks like a meat-eating machine. For the rex to transition to an herbivore, or from an herbivore to a carnivore, would require some major biological changes. Some of the old Earth creationists believe that would take way too long than basically the 1500 to 2000 years span between Adam and Eve and Noah. So from the time of creation to the flood, basically, it's not. it's too short of an amount of time for them. But just because we have sharp teeth, it doesn't mean that we eat veggies all the time. Okay, so for example, fruit bats have very sharp teeth. Okay, but they only eat fruit. People don't have sharp teeth, but we like to eat meat. Old Earth creationists do not consider this as a possibility, though. So, and therefore, they tend to side with the slow progression of evolution. They side with mainstream science, and therefore they kind of, in a way, they're rejecting the Genesis narrative, even though it was written in a historical format. It's not written poetically. They're just assuming, they're just making the interjection that it is poetic and therefore invalid as a accurate account of history based on an accurate timeline. So that's my answer to question number 91. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next question.